Well, hello people, and welcome back to some more City Skylines 2 coverage. I hope you're having a wonderful day. This is the fifth of the dev diaries, this time focusing on city services, so as always, we'll have a look at the video and then dive into the blog. So, let's see what's happening here today, shall we?
Successful city building in City Skylines 2 is all about people, anticipating their needs and desires.
Really nice opening shot there, isn't it? Really love the fact we got pedestrian roads baked into the base game as well. I know that was confirmed a few dev diaries ago, but look at that vista. Such a much more nicer, realistic looking waterfront, isn't it? Also very excited to see this bloke here on the left sat on a bench. That looks super cool. I really like that.
Ensuring they feel safe and actually keeping them safe. Understanding what annoys and delights them, and doing what it takes to give them healthy, happy lives from beginning to end. How? City services. You'll build clinics and hospitals to deliver healthcare, plus the ambulance service people need in life or death situations. Oh, yeah, sometimes it will be a death situation, so you'll add death care service.
So seeing the first time the crematorium there, it looks like, and just a bit of a first impression, the services just look much more realistic, don't they? A lot less cartoonish than City Skylines 1. I'm hoping, as we're talking about death care here, that the process of emptying a cemetery is, I guess, better than it was in Cities 1. I found it a little bit ridiculous that the mayor had to go and manually empty a cemetery in Cities Skylines 1. I'm hoping that's been changed. Minor bugbear, but I hope it's different.
Services that transport people to the city's crematorium.
Really nice assets, aren't they? Just so much nicely designed.
And cemeteries.
And there is a shot of the cemetery as well, which we saw in the second dev diary from the bird's eye view, I think, didn't we? But now confirmation, of course, that it is a cemetery. Much nicer, much larger as well than its City Skylines 1 counterpart, isn't it?
You'll set up schools for kids of all ages, plus colleges and universities.
So interesting there that it would seem that college and university are now two separate types of education. So we'll have elementary, high school, college, and university this time around.
After all, education fosters social advancement.
And we can see the breakdown of that demographic there. So a new education level to play with is quite interesting.
Life still might take a turn for the worse for some people.
Seen a good shot of a building here as well. The front of it may be a little bit janky. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. It does look like the terrain is still a bit of an issue when placing down assets, but I'm sure it can be forgiven and fixed with mods eventually. But really nice looking buildings, aren't they? They've got little parks around the little benches. One concern that I might possibly highlight here is that it might take away a little bit of the design. You know how in Cities Skylines 1, for those that watch my channel, we like to build small little school campuses by placing the school asset and then partner it with, say, a basketball court or one of Bad Peanut's sports venues. I'm a big fan of the way they're taking the modular services, but I also feel on the other side of that sword, it might take away from being able to detail small little campuses because they're so modular now. Again, I'm going to have to wait until I play it, until I really can decide on that, but something to consider, I think.
When it does, you'll want the safety net of a welfare office.
So you also get a welfare office now as well, which is quite interesting. So I'm guessing that's certainly going to play into the more advanced economy simulation that's going on in Cities 2, that we now have to deal with welfare as well.
One thing that improves everyone's well-being.
This is cute. We're seeing props here. This looks like it's on the edge of a waterfront, maybe a building, but we can see a little hot dog cart. Some benches that hopefully have been placed. They kind of look like they're part of an asset, so I'm not going to get too excited about that. But I hope we can place those little hot dog carts around.
No matter what's going on in life, it's time outdoors. You'll create parks, plazas, attractions.
We can see some parks here as well now for the first time as well, can't we? How exciting. So there's a couple different tabs here, isn't there? There's a tree and a bench with more trees, a basketball, and then for some reason that's separated into an American football and an actual football are separate from the basketball. I wonder why that is. And then it looks like a tourist with a camera on that second tab, doesn't it? And then the Arc de Triomphe as well. But really cool to see some parks being placed for the first time. We love parks as well, of course. We're going to have to wait and see what we can get here. And it looks as though in the bottom left here as well, $2 has drawn out a little pathway, hasn't it, to almost essentially serve as a little pier, which is a nice little detail. Cute.
And landmarks that make people living nearby happier and healthier. As in real life, safety first is a good mantra in City Skylines 2.
See some of that fire animation at the end of the street there as well, can't we? Pretty cool. Again, just look at all these big Chungus service assets, much more bigger, much more realistic than the Cities 1 version.
So you'll want various fire and rescue services. Just adding a firehouse reduces the likelihood of a blaze in the neighborhood. Same with police stations.
Again, nothing massively new here. We're seeing prison and jail availabilities, crime rates and whatnot. We're pretty used to this in Cities 1. But again, assets are just looking much nicer, much cleaner, aren't they?
Build them and send patrols out onto the streets to cut crime. Communications is a new city service. And
so this is interesting. Essentially, telecommunications has been confirmed. Wi-Fi as well is also confirmed a little bit later in the dev diary. So Wi-Fi was a policy in Cities 1 and almost went entirely unnoticed. It was pretty useless. So I'm interested to see exactly how much the telecommunications service is going to be factored into Cities happiness. Is it something we're going to notice and have a proper impact, or is it essentially just another box to tick?
City Skylines too, helping you meet more essential needs. That includes the internet. Naturally, the easier it is to connect to the web, the happier everyone will feel and the more profitable the city's businesses will be.
So apparently everyone will feel happier with Wi-Fi and businesses will become more profitable. Again, we know Cities is playing with a much more advanced economy this time around. So it's going to be interesting to see just how important it is, I think.
Of course, everyone relies on electricity, so you want to avoid long outages. They aren't just aggravating. Blackouts will prompt people to move out and force businesses to pause production, putting profits.
So here placing down what appears to be, I guess, like a battery or a transformer. And we can also see that in the left-hand side here of the electricity tab that batteries do have a charge. So it looks like we can actually store power after it's been produced or imported, which is quite cool. And also a significant sort of selection of power assets here as well. I also love as well, I think we've missed this in previous dev diaries, but we have seen them before, but rural power poles have been confirmed. Enormous lover of that you don't always have to use these huge, massive power pylons anymore. Great to see a rural power pole in the game.
It's at risk. Keep electricity lines humming with sustainable energy sources like wind, solar, geothermal, and hydropower.
So we get some confirmation of renewable ones there, wind, solar, geothermal, and hydro. Which is good because I think geothermal was brought in with the DLC, wasn't it? In Cities 1, so nice to see some renewable energies factored into the base game.
Go old school with fossil fuels like coal and gas. There's always the nuclear option too.
And coal, gas, and nuclear also confirmed as well. So a lot of power options at the start of the base game.
This is the most realistic city builder ever. So you'll need to deal with a lot of
So there's some interesting pollution here. We can see that the brown pollution now seems to have shifted to more of a sort of copper red colour, doesn't it?
stuff. We're talking sewage. Gross? Yes. Necessary? Also yes. With a wastewater treatment plant, you can purify.
Again, we can see sewage export as another option here as well. I'm not entirely sure why you would want to export sewage, or indeed why someone would even buy sewage. I guess maybe they're being paid to process it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not massively knowledgeable on sewage treatment and processing. I'm assuming that would be why. If you know, please let me know down below.
Buy sewage and circulate water into your city's.
Again, much more realistic assets here, aren't they? I believe these are called purifiers. I realise I just said that I'm not up to date with my sewage processing knowledge and have now identified a very advanced bit of sewage treatment equipment, but I'm pretty sure these are purifiers. But again, I'll make the same point I've made 20 times already this video. Assets are much more realistic, much nicer looking than their cartoony CS1 counterparts.
Freshwater network. Or you can pump sewage into open waters.
This is a bit weird. Really don't like that water droplet there. That looks like it's almost like the texture is missing from the asset. I hope that's not something we see often and is actually removed from that as well. It looks like a PNG that hasn't had its sort of background cropped away. Looks a little odd to me, that water droplet.
And out of the network. Don't forget to stay on top of garbage. Garbage processing.
And this is cool. So last week we got drawable fields confirmed. And we also had this confirmed as well, but we didn't actually cover it in the video. But drawable landfill also confirmed as well. Really cool. It's going to be much better than those crap landfills there. It's not that landfill is a good thing, but of course it's a a realistic part of any industry landscape, especially sort of an industrial area. Having properly sized landfills is very cool rather than just ploppable 8x8 assets now. Big fan of that.
Landfills, and an incineration plant will stop it piling up. But don't take shortcuts. Air and water pollution can sink land values.
So we get a pretty detailed view here of some of the pollution overlays, and I believe now that groundwater is a mechanic. So rather than just placing down a water tower and the tower endlessly sucking up water from essentially just the middle of the earth, groundwaters now have a refreshment rate, and you also have to bear in mind pollution to those as well, which is cool. I'm happy to see that mechanic get fleshed out a little bit more, and just how much detail is available here on just the water pollution mechanic alone. Cool, I'm a fan of this.
Harm the health of residents and tarnish the city's appeal to tourists.
And we can see people here as well whinging of air pollution for the first time as well, can't we? Can't wait to deal with those and ignore them while we continue to fence detail.
Ready to introduce a city service? Previously, you only had to construct a...
So here we get an elementary school as well, by the looks of it doing it. Again, much nicer, realistic looking schools. I would say they're almost quite old school looking. I'm hoping we're going to get some more modern schools. Maybe this is tied into the theme, but they're all very kind of almost old Victorian looking schools, aren't they? Rather than more modern education facilities. But again, DLC I imagine will change that at some point, but maybe it's also tied into the theme. We'll wait and see.
City service building. When that service needed to cover a larger area or support more people.
So of course we know about the whole modular thing in a minute, so we can see different upgrades here. It looks like there's different wings to add on to it, perhaps a playground as well. That looks like down there at the bottom, doesn't it? But again, cool to see that the modularity of cities' skylines is also extending to its service buildings as well.
You simply constructed the same building again.
Cute little bus stop down here on the left too, isn't there? I like that.
Not anymore. Almost all city services can now be upgraded to scale operations and expand functionality.
There you go, so that's the process, isn't it? You just click it, drag it on, and then you're building upgrades immediately. Really cool. Again, I'd argue it maybe takes away from us all designing our own medical and school campuses because everything's so modular now. But I'm sure we can all come up with different positionings for them, can't we?
While city services make your city livable, they come at a cost. Balancing these costs and the very real needs of everyone in your city is the name of the game.
So we're getting a pretty in-depth look here at some of the services, which is really cool. Also manually adjusting a budget slider for them as well. And it would appear that this city is also being built in New Zealand. I wonder who's been playing City Skylines 2 now, This is something you want to tell us, Biffa? No? But very cool, some new budget sliders to play with. Service budget affects service building efficiency. Efficiency affects the graduation chance of students. And then efficiency also affects the citywide effects of the Technical University, Medical Uni, Radio Telescope, Geological Research Centre, and the Large Hadron Collider, which I'm guessing are going to be signature or unique buildings, aren't they?
Subscribe to the City Skylines 2 YouTube channel for updates and more feature highlights.
So that is the dev diary. Let's have a little skim over the blog now and see if there's anything worth picking out here. So let's have a little skim through the blog together. There's a fair bit of information to cover here, but we'll pick out some key talking points. So we do get confirmation here. Of course, we've seen this in the announcement trailer and have seen little sort of hints of it in previous dev diaries, that all of the water pipes and electric cables run pre-built under the roads, so no more having to deal with the handicap of a vanilla node count anymore, hopefully, because water pipes were a serious hindrance on that. So I'm hoping that that hard cap of a node count is no longer something to worry about when playing Cities 2. And of course we know about our road maintenance city service. It's going to go out and fix up roads, which will decrease the chances of car accidents while also patching up worn down asphalt as well. So now moving down to electricity, of course people aren't going to be happy if they lose electricity. That's blindingly obvious. But then we come on to some of our confirmations. We have wind, solar, geothermal and hydroelectric power all available from the base game. And fossil fuels, coal and gas alongside nuclear also available. So good chunk and selection of them. Of course we had geothermal and solar introduced as part of green cities, so nice to see that that is in the base game now. So this is what we was talking about earlier, so we'll come on to water and sewage here. So similar to City Skylines, surface water can be pumped from open water sources. That's pretty self-explanatory, of course, like a river or an ocean. However, groundwater works quite differently in City Skylines 2. So unlike the game's predecessor where the groundwater was pumped by placing water towers anywhere on the map, City Skylines 2 will feature groundwater deposits full of fresh water. These reservoirs have a limited refreshment rate and are very susceptible to ground pollution. So that's cool that you now have to factor in kind of like the groundwater into your ground pollution mechanic and they kind of cross over. That's definitely kind of making that pollution mechanic deeper. Really cool that you have to be careful where you're placing this stuff a lot more carefully now. Of course, sewage treatment is a crucial part, and sewage can either be pumped out of the water network and into open waters like we saw in the trailer with that kind of copper red dye in the water, didn't we? Or it can be sent to a treatment plant where it's purified and pumped back into the water network with the pollutants being shipped elsewhere. Again, some nice shots of the water treatment stuff here. Really don't like that water droplet that's on them. It looks like it hasn't had its background chopped off. I'm hoping that changes. So this is a little disappointing here. So it says, at their core, both healthcare and deathcare are relatively straightforward services and function much like they do in the game's predecessor. Medical clinics and hospitals provide healthcare for the sick, which is obviously pretty obvious, but I really hope that this isn't the case. I'm thinking maybe they just sort of function the same. Healthcare in Cities 1 is kind of a joke. People don't really get sick. They're essentially just park buildings that increase land value and make people in the area happy. I'm hoping to see like a proper sickness mechanic. Like I want to see, maybe not particularly a pandemic, but a bug or something that sweeps through the city, colds, flus, etc. A proper healthcare and illness system as part of the simulation. Otherwise, it's just the same as it is in Cities 1. Additionally, healthcare provides citizens in the surrounding area with a passive health bonus, while ambulances will respond to traffic accidents, which we know about. But that's a little disappointing to me, the fact that it says they kind of function the same. I'm hoping that means just the assets themselves rather than the actual healthcare mechanic. I'm not sure. But two very pretty buildings here, right? So we've got the Health Research Institute on the left, what a gorgeous asset. And then the hospital on the right here too. Death care will prepare the deceased on their final journey, transporting them to cemeteries and crematoriums in hearses. Citizens can die of old age if their health decreases too much, if they're involved in a traffic accident, or if they're inside a building when it collapses due to being abandoned or affected by a natural disaster. So that gives me a little more confidence if their health decreases too much. I'm hoping that's hinting at the fact that healthcare is a proper thing now, and not just park buildings anymore. Look at these cemeteries, just so much nicer designed, aren't they? Really cute assets, really happy with those. I just hope it doesn't involve us coming up to it every couple of hours and hitting empty and having to wait 3 hours for all the bodies to be excavated out of the ground, because it just doesn't happen like that in real life. So I'm hoping it will change in Cities 2, but really happy with the new, much more nicer looking assets. So citizen health is affected by the availability of resources the household uses and their consumption, as well as the availability of healthcare. Negative effects on citizen health are different pollution types, previous illnesses and injuries, so that's a little more encouraging that we're going to see illness and a proper healthcare mechanic. And any uncollected garbage will also cause them to lose health as well. Sick citizen cannot contribute to their workplace, and thus that will affect the company's efficiency. Therefore, it's important to make sure that Sims are healthy to help maximise the city's success. So now we're coming on to some of our landfill stuff. Again, another shot here of that durable landfill. So much, I don't want to use the word cooler because landfill sites are actually quite horrific places to be, but they are realistic parts of a big metropolitan area. All that crap has to go somewhere, so I'm really happy to see that factored into Cities 2 as well. So garbage is handled by building landfills and other garbage management buildings, which tend to pollute their surroundings, of course, with the incineration plant pushing out a lot of air pollution. Again, pretty similar to what we know in Cities 1. These are horrifically polluting buildings, with the recycling centre offering a slightly less pollutive way of managing traffic. Nothing new there. So interesting here as we come into education and research. Children will always go to an elementary school, of course, if one is available. But while teens and adults have the freedom to choose whether to go to school or switch to working, teens can go to high school while adults have the option to go to college or one of the universities available in the game. When choosing between school and work, citizens will calculate which is financially more beneficial for them to start work right now in a lower position earning money, or study for a higher position earning them more money. And some citizens will also simply choose to study or work based on their inherent interests. So that's really cool. Again, it's kind of playing into that whole much more fleshed out simulation, isn't it? But I really didn't expect them to kind of go, simulating teens and adults deciding whether or not they want to go to college. I kind of thought they would always go to one if there's one available, but turns out that's not the case. So really cool to see that that's factored into the simulation. a really nice looking college building here as well. But I think we've seen the university, haven't we? But I think this is the college, this one here. Really cute, nice building. Again, quite old-fashioned in the design. I'm assuming that's coming down to the theme, but still great nonetheless. Much happier with it than the Cities 1 counterparts. And we do see confirmation here of those 5 levels of education: uneducated, poorly educated, well, and highly educated as well. And again, we know education levels are important when filling job positions. We've seen this before in Cities 1, but it definitely seems more fleshed out in the simulation for Cities 2. And a good shot here of the local elementary school here as well. Really nice buildings. Great shot here too of the firehouse. Really nice. Again, there's nothing overly interesting here that we haven't seen. You know, firehouses are going to send fire trucks to fires and car crashes. It's pretty self-explanatory stuff here. And we also see the fire watchtowers from, I believe there was natural disasters, wasn't it, that brought us to fire watchtowers. They will make a return for the base game in Cities 1 that can be placed in the wilderness to keep an eye and lower the risk of forest fires in the surrounding area. And again, forest fires will need the helicopter depot in order to be put out, because of course there's no roads for trucks to get there. And it looks like we can see a shot of that fire helicopter depot in the background there too. So fire and rescue also include disaster prevention and response. Fire engines rush to rescue citizens trapped in collapsed buildings, while the early disaster warning system detects natural disasters early and sends out notifications to take shelter. If the city has emergency shelters, citizens hurry there and wait out the disaster. So natural disasters will be in the base game. Of course, it was a DLC for Cities 1. I never play with them. It's just not something that appeals to me. I totally understand they happen in the real world, but when I'm playing a city simulator, I'm spending hours detailing neighborhoods, picking the right assets, making them look good. I don't want that to be wiped out just at a moment's notice. It's not a gameplay style that appeals to me. I'm hoping it is going to be a toggleable option. I'm guessing it will be. But of course, we'll wait and see. So moving on from disasters and fire, we come up to police headquarters, again, which we know there's going to be jails and prisons and whatnot. Nice shot here of the police station asset itself. The prison asset also looked great here as well, doesn't it? Much bigger, realistic looking prison than the one we got with After Dark, I think it was, that brought it in Cities 1. So arrested criminals are sent to jail, and then some criminals are sentenced to serve prison time, and then they are then transported to a local prison, or indeed an outside connection if a local prison is not available, or I'm guessing also at capacity. So it looks like we can export prisoners as well as sewage, although I guess you could argue they are the same thing in most aspects. So again, nothing groundbreaking here. Each building will generate a crime probability, and the further away that is from a police station, the more likely it is to suffer crime. Pretty similar to Cities 1 here. So a new administration services includes the welfare office, which we saw in the trailer. So we're going to have to deal with, you know, state welfare and stuff like that. City halls, central banks and whatnot all fall under the administration office. So the welfare office helps boost people down in their luck and boost their well-being if their happiness is below half, which is cool. City Hall has wide effects ranging from lowered loan interest rates and import costs to reduced crime rates and building level costs, which is cool that the City Hall is functional. But, you know, in Cities 1, when you take a loan, you don't even notice the loan repayments coming in and out of your weekly budget. So it's cool that it's there. I'm just not sure how important it actually is to factor in. Maybe there's more important things that could have been factored in here with the City Hall. But it has an effect at least. It's not just aesthetic, which I felt like a lot of things were in Cities 1. And the central bank also helps reduce loans and boost companies' profits by lowering input costs while also increasing export profits, which is cool. So it'd be interesting to see how cheesable these are. If we can place multiple central banks, does that mean we can just keep buffing these percentages and profits? Be interesting to see how cheesy we can actually make that. So this is the bit that really flowers my garden, you know, parks and recreation. We love our parks. So parks and recreation fill a different role in Cities 2 than in the previous game where they affected land value directly. Placing a lot of them in the city was beneficial as they saturated the area, which it did. However, in Cities 2, parks, plazas, tourist attractions and landmarks don't directly increase land value. So that's interesting. You can no longer span them just to get the land value up. Instead, what they do is they will answer to the citizens' various needs, and if their needs are met, citizens find the area where they live appealing, and that will thus increase the land value as the citizens are willing to continue living there and paying higher rent. So rather than the asset itself directly affecting the land value, it's meeting the Sims criteria of having parks there that increases the land value, which is cool. I guess it makes it a little more realistic. It's kind of a case of 6 and 2 3s, is it not? I don't know. A really great shot here well of some tennis courts, what looks like little outdoor gyms as well. And these look really similar to the ploppable ones that we got added with the update recently in Cities 1, doesn't it? A lot of those new After Dark parks that we got. Parks and recreation buildings offer citizens options where they can spend their free time fulfilling leisure demands, which in turn affects their well-being, which is nice. Hopefully again tying into the healthcare mechanic. This need for leisure can be fulfilled in many different ways, such as going shopping in a commercial area, enjoying entertainment and meals in places like restaurants and visiting city parks, plazas, sports venues, tourist attractions and landmarks. Weather and time of the year have an effect on citizens' choice to fulfill their leisure demands, which is cool. I'm guessing you're not going to see people out playing tennis in the pissing rain. Warm and sunny weather encourages time to spend time outdoors in the parks, while rain or cloudy weather makes them choose indoor activities such as shopping instead. So that's really cool. So you're going to see people's, I guess, happiness and leisure demands really change depending on what climate and biome you're playing in on your map, which will make it really different as to how everyone develops their park and recreation offerings, I guess. Parks and rec buildings also have an attractiveness value which affects how attractive the city is for tourists by adding to the attractiveness value for the city. Tourists stay at local hotels when in the city and make decisions about visiting city attractions based on their distance from the hotel. So kind of seeing a little bit of the hotels and retreats mechanic coming in here as well, aren't we, with this little sentence here. Tourists might choose a more attractive park or landmark further away if the net result is faster fulfilled leisure demand, regardless of the travel time and cost. Then we come on to communications, which is also going to talk about the new telecom service as well. So post offices from the Industries DLC seems to be confirmed within the base game as well. This will fill citizens, company and city service needs to receive mail, of course. So post services will fulfill the citizens, companies and city services needs directly affecting their well-being. So if they can send their postcards and whatnot, they're going to be happy. If they can't, then they're going to be unhappy. Which is cool, because again, post kind of felt like a pretty shallow mechanic in Cities 1, so it seems to be a little more fleshed out here. And then our post office building here, which we can see in the bottom, which is looking a lot nicer. Really like the look of the post office. Sends out post vans to collect mail from mailboxes, used by private citizens to send mail, and directly from companies and city services. Collected mail is stored in the post office until it is sent either to an outside connection or a post sorting facility. So telecoms is all about providing citizens and companies with high-speed internet. Each citizen, be it a resident in an apartment building or a worker in a company or a student in a school, uses a small portion of network bandwidth, 1 gigabits, which is cool that you've now got to factor in, I guess, you know, a bandwidth currency. You've got to make sure that your city actually has enough bandwidth to support all those people using it, which is cool. Definitely seems to be a little bit more fleshed out. Good telecom services increases citizens' well-being as it provides them with recreation, fulfilling their leisure demand, and the amount of well-being a citizen gains from using the internet will depend on the strength of the network signal, which is really cool, which we can see is based on these ones here. So we've got the server farm on the left, really big asset, quite cool, isn't it? And then also the telecom tower on the right. So I guess it's fun to have a new tower like that, and according to the dev diary here, it's going to be directly affecting our citizens' well-being because it's going to fulfill that leisure demand as well, which is really cool. So now we come on to landscaping, which has remained largely the same in Cities Skylines 2. Again, we can see some pretty similar looking tools here, like the slope terrain tool. We do get shift terrain, level terrain, soften, and slope. Landscaping also includes options to plant trees, which have a life cycle in Cities Skylines 2 where they grow older and bigger as time goes on. Placing new trees on the map using the tools in the landscape and vegetation menu plants tree saplings that will eventually grow into mature trees. So that's cool. It's definitely a lot more realistic, but that could really affect how we detail areas. Now, if we want a tree-lined street, or just some trees in a park, they're not just going to instantly be there. We have to wait for them to grow up, and eventually they'll get so old and so tall they might become too big, and then we have to, I guess, delete them and replant them. I really need to play with that to see how that's going to affect how we detail with trees before we can either get excited or disappointed about it. But it's interesting to say the least, I think, at this point, isn't it? And then also a little side note here as well, if a forest fire destroys part of a forest, it will take time for the new trees to grow in place of the old burned ones. And then pathways, yes please, everyone look at that pedestrian bridge, that is so nice, that's the best thing, isn't it? So pathways are another familiar feature in the landscaping menu, enabling you to create pavement paths for pedestrians, including various styles of pedestrian bridges, which is really cool. So pick between different styles now. rather than just having the regular base game vanilla one. As citizens make their pathfinding decisions, one of the options to move around the city is walking. Of course, we know on the channel we love our walkability. Whatever chance we get, we'll always put a bridge in. And a little note here as to what I'm assuming is New Dollarton from $2 builds is if you see that the pathway all converge at the bottom of this bridge here, it looks like it's been elevated with Move It, doesn't it? Like it's just brought that node up a little bit. Of course, that could have been terraformed, absolutely could have been. Kind of looks like it's been manipulated, doesn't it? So it's ever so slightly higher at the base of the bridge so it can clear the road as it curves around. I might be reading way too much into that, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. So now we come into the service upgrades, which again we've sort of touched on before in previous dev diaries, is the fact that, you know, if you needed more of that same service, you would place another asset, but now we just upgrade the same asset with different upgrades. It's tying into the whole modular thing, isn't it? So as an example here, you know, you can place an ambulance depot or an extension wing onto a medical center to increase the capacity of that service rather than having to place a new medical center, for example. Likewise, again, with an elementary school, you can add on an extension wing to increase student capacity, while placing a children's clinical playground will improve student health and well-being. So just tying into that whole modular expansion stuff, we've covered this in previous diaries before. So here we come on to discuss a few of these modular upgrade types and how they're actually going to function. So they're broken down between three categories: operational, extension, and sub-buildings. Operational upgrades add functional and statistical changes to the building without changing its looks. This can be bandwidth increase for a radio mast, exhaust filters installed in a coal plant, or a dispatch center for a taxi depot. An extension will be a visible upgrade that connects directly to the main building. These, among other things, extension wings for medical facilities, schools providing with patient capacity, garages for various service, increasing the size of their service vehicle fleet, and additional turbines for power plants. And then sub-buildings are separate buildings attached to the service building's existing lot. And these can be, for example, fuel storage for a power plant, or a children's clinic and playground for an elementary school. And we can see here one of those sub-buildings being added to a fire station where it's adding a disaster response unit. I'm guessing, based on the criteria above, that this is a sub-building because it's being added onto the existing lot size. So it's cool to get some information on exactly how this new modular system is going to work. It looks like it's broken down on 3 different levels. So it also comes on to say that, you know, some service buildings, such as many of the power plants, will use fuel or another resource in order for them to function. Pretty similar cases to cities. One, you know, your power production is going to dip during the night time if you're mainly reliant on solar panel electricity, but, you know, this time we do have built-in batteries to combat that, which wasn't really a thing in Cities 1. Interesting here that medical facilities are another example of a service dependent on a resource, as they use pharmaceutical goods, which is a type of produced goods. If the building runs out of the resource, its efficiency decreases, and as a result, the treatment bonus added to the citizen's recovery decreases. It doesn't look like it totally stops, it just loses a buff, I guess. But interesting that you're now even seeing pharmaceuticals as a required goods. You know, we saw oil power plants run out of oil in Cities 1, but that's about as deep as that got. But now our hospitals can run out of medical supplies, which really ties back into their whole much more in-depth, fleshed out import and export function, doesn't it? Looks like we're really going to have to be on the ball with that to keep everything running smoothly. So now we come on to a little bit about service trade, where we can import and export our various services now, which I'm really happy to see this feature included in Cities 2. So services can be imported from or exported to neighbouring cities using outside connections, which we know about. You can not only save money by building a service, but of course imported services also cost money, and it takes time for the service vehicles to arrive from the outside connections. On the other hand, exporting services can be beneficial to a large and established city, selling any excess to neighbouring cities. Electricity, water and sewage will all be imported and exported. Electricity is transferred via power lines into a transformer station, or vice versa. Clean water can be delivered to the city or pumped to neighbouring cities via pipe outside connections, and likewise with sewage as well. To import and export both water and sewage, you will need to grow your city enough to reach the edges of the map, where you can create pipe outside connections. Excess output is always sold if possible, while keeping enough for the city's own needs, and if the usage increases, then less will also be sold to the outside connection. So it looks like it's going to be pretty late game until you start importing and exporting resources, which I guess makes sense. In this particular shot of New Dollarton, he's up to 112,000 people before he's looking at import and exporting, so I'm guessing it's going to be a fairly late game mechanic. So here we get a little look at the new district and policies tool. So districts will give you more in-depth information about the populace, which we know about, while policies can be applied to individual districts or citywide. Again, pretty similar to Cities 1. Creating a new district is quite straightforward with the district tool. You define an area by placing corner nodes. Once you close the area, the district is created, so we don't get the little brush tool anymore. I see an example of it here, a district being created with these little nodes, pretty similar to how the landfill and fields are also drawn as well, it looks like. City services can be assigned to one or more districts, limiting their services to only those areas of the city. That is really cool, so no longer will you have to expect a fire engine to come from right the other side of the map just because that's how the simulation algorithm picked it up. You only want one firehouse to operate in a certain area of the city. You can do that now. That's really cool. It was something that came with a mod functionality in Cities 1, wasn't it? There was quite a large, substantial, very popular mod to achieve that in Cities 1, so really happy to see that you can now have city services limited to just certain areas of the city. And our district policies bring more planning control over districts. For example, you can limit heavy traffic in a district to decrease traffic-based noise. We saw that in Cities 1, nothing overly exciting there. Installing speed bumps will slow down traffic. That's cool that you can add speed bumps now. Hopefully they're also visual as well. And roadside parking can also bring in some income from the district, but it will affect citizens' pathfinding, as they now have to calculate whether or not it's cheaper to use other methods of public transport. And we can see for the first time here as well, some district planning things, can't we? So what do we have here? We've got a combustion engine ban, energy consumption awareness, a gated community policy, which is really cool. I wonder what that's going to do. A heavy traffic ban, of course, we saw that in Cities 1. There's also a recycling policy and roadside parking fee as well, which again, we have the slider to adjust. And also speed bumps there as well, which we talked about earlier. So really cool to see that for the first time. You can also see what local services the district here has as well. 3 crematoriums, which seems a little excessive, and a landfill. City policies are different from district policies and have city-wide effects, such as removing the speed limits from highways or installing air filters for manufacturing companies in industrial zones to limit air pollution. Wonder how many car crashes that's going to cause by removing the speed limit from a highway. Some policies have a cost or negative consequence linked to them, while others are more neutral. Taking our example of highway speed with no limits, this policy can make traffic flow faster, but also increases the likelihood of traffic accidents, as we thought. Whilst installing air filters decreases the air pollution, but those filters need cleaning every now and again, and increase the amount of garbage that these factories produce. So it really is quite sensitive and fickle, isn't it? With all this little policy stuff, seems to be much more involved in the actual running of the city rather than just little boxes you tick and don't really ever bother with again, like it was in Cities 1. We can also see some more city policies here as well. Doesn't look as though there's a vast amount of them. I'm guessing we're going to get new policies with a DLC, of course, as we did in the first game. As we see here, we have pre-release programs, so prisoners are enrolled in educational programs before they are released from prison. This helps integrate them back into society and reduces the likelihood of them committing crimes again. That, to me, kind of indicates that ex-cons will be more at risk of committing crimes again, which I guess is accurate to the real world, but I didn't really think cities would factor that into its simulation either, but cool that it does. They've also got advanced pollution management, city promotion, high-speed highways, and the pre-release one that we looked at there as well. And then it does confirm here that Cities 2 will have 7 different district policies and 5 city-wide policies, which is maybe a little underwhelming. Obviously significantly less than the endgame Cities Skylines 1 with all the DLCs. Of course, there was huge lists of policies that you could apply district-specific or city-wide. But I guess we're back to a base game. Cool that they're there, but maybe we'll expect a little bit more than just 5. But that is all we have for you today. So, some interesting things, not the most exciting dev diaries. There's a lot of stuff here that's kind of carried over from Cities 1, but cool to get a look at the pathways, also a little bit more information on how that more modular upgrade system is going to work as well, having it broke down to 3 different types of upgrades essentially. The drawable landfill is very exciting, and the new service assets in general just look so much nicer and realistic. But as always, let's please keep that conversation going down below about Cities Skylines 2. Anything here that's really flowered your garden and got you quite excited? Or is there something that's heavily grinding your gears and really quite pissing you off. But let's keep that conversation going. I will reply to as many of you as I can. But otherwise, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.
Successful city building and City Skylines 2 is all about people. Anticipating their needs and desires, ensuring they feel safe, and actually keeping them safe. Understanding what annoys and delights them, and doing what it takes to give them healthy, happy lives from beginning to end. How? City services. You'll build clinics and hospitals to deliver healthcare, plus the ambulance service people need in life or death situations. Oh, yeah, sometimes it will be a death situation. So you'll add death care services that transport people to the city's crematoriums and cemeteries. You'll set up schools for kids of all ages, plus colleges and universities. After all, education fosters social advancement. Life still might take a turn for the worse for some people. When it does, you'll want the safety net of a welfare office. One thing that improves everyone's well-being, no matter what's going on in life, is time outdoors. You'll create parks, plazas, attractions, and landmarks that make people living nearby happier and healthier. As in real life, safety first is a good mantra in City Skylines 2. So you'll want various fire and rescue services. Just adding a firehouse reduces the likelihood of a blaze in the neighborhood. Same with police stations. Build them and send patrols out onto the streets to cut crime. Communications is a new city service in City Skylines 2, helping you meet more essential needs. That includes the internet. Naturally, the easier it is to connect to the web, the happier everyone will feel and the more profitable the city's businesses will be. Of course, everyone relies on electricity, so you want to avoid long outages. They aren't just aggravating. Blackouts will prompt people to move out and force businesses to pause production, putting profits at risk. Keep electricity lines humming with sustainable energy sources like wind, solar, geothermal, and hydropower. Go old school with fossil fuels like coal and gas. There's always the nuclear option too. This is the most realistic city builder ever. So you'll need to deal with a lot of stuff. We're talking sewage. Gross? Yes. Necessary? Also yes. With a wastewater treatment plant, you can purify sewage and circulate water into your city's freshwater network. Or you can pump sewage into open waters and out of the network. Don't forget to stay on top of garbage. Garbage processing centers, landfills, and an incineration plant will stop it piling up. But don't take shortcuts. Air and water pollution can sink land values, harm the health of residents, and tarnish the city's appeal to tourists. Ready to introduce a city service? Previously, you only had to construct a city service building. When that service needed to cover a larger area or support more people, you simply constructed the same building again. Not anymore. Almost all city services can now be upgraded to scale operations and expand functionality. While city services make your city livable, they come at a cost. Balancing these costs and the very real needs of everyone in your city is the name of the game. Subscribe to the City Skylines 2 YouTube channel for updates and more feature highlights.